critical corners for this Grand Prix.
Hamilton's going to try again, this time on the inside, a continent touch! Verstappen!
When the championship hangs in the balance, drivers will lay it all on the line.
Into Brooklands.
Not going to get a chance to weave because already Hamilton is with them. They almost touch. They go into Brooklands.
Problem is that things often go horribly wrong.
Bottas, round turn 3 we go. And it's Nico Rosberg and Hamilton's onto the grass. And Hamilton's had a massive crash. And he's crashed into it.
Despite the risk, Formula One drivers seek glory and will take every opportunity possible. As the great Ayrton Senna once said, if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver. So, join us today as we look at 7 of the craziest crashes in Formula One history. Number 1. Felipe Massa escapes with his life intact. Let's start with something a little more unique. During one of the most incredible F1 seasons in history, the unthinkable happened. In fact, what we're about to share has never happened before in the sport's history. With the rise of Brawn GP, the season was often dominated by this new startup. Jenson Button and Rubens Barrichello will ultimately go on to win the championship, but not without a little bit of controversy along the way. Nevertheless, the Hungarian Grand Prix had an eventful qualifying session. With Ferrari slowly making gains on Brawn GP, the Scuderia was seeking a much better start to the GP. Unfortunately, tragedy struck in qualifying. With the Ferrari looking good, a small spring was detached from Rubens Barrichello's Brawn car. The small piece should never have caused any concern, but behind the Brawn driver was his compatriot Felipe Massa. Whilst the spring detached from the Brawn, it bounced a few times, hitting Felipe Massa on the helmet. According to a post-race investigation, the contact happened at a speed exceeding 150 miles per hour. Massa lost consciousness almost immediately. Subsequently, he would be a passenger in the Ferrari, which continued travelling forward at a high speed. Fortunately, the car would come to a stop in the tyre barrier, leading to a 9-day ordeal. Massa found himself in hospital, and his injury would ultimately rule him out for the rest of the season. While this was not a horrific crash like some of those you're about to see, it could have been far worse. Number 2. Alonso takes off in Australia. Albert Park is perhaps one of the most unique circuits. Not only does it have 3 DRS zones, but it's actually a street track. Serving as the opener of the 2016 season, Australia played witness to one of the most horrific accidents in F1 history. Driving for McLaren, Fernando Alonso came face to face with almost certain injury. On lap 17, the Spaniard found himself tucked up behind the Haas of Gutierrez. Now, Albert Park doesn't have many overtaking opportunities, and this can be detrimental when a faster car finds itself behind a Haas. However, Alonso had a brief lapse in concentration and he miscalculated the size of the gap. With Gutierrez slamming on the brakes, Alonso collided with the rear wheel of the Haas driver. Upon making contact, the Spaniard was sent flying in the air. The McLaren MP431 somersaulted through the vertical while disintegrating. It finally came to a stop in the gravel trap. Fortunately, Alonso would emerge unscathed, only showing a little bit of frustration following the ordeal. Number 3. Niki Lauda's Dance with Fate. For the next one, we have to travel back to the 1970s. Back then, F1 safety regulations were a mere afterthought. Everyone was trying to build the fastest car, and safety will only be the last thing people thought about. Back in 1976, the title was on a knife edge. 2 drivers, Niki Lauda and James Hunt, were battling it out for the title when Lauda came face to face with his maker. During the 1976 German Grand Prix, Lauda had some impressive form. The Austrian driver set a blistering time during qualifying, which would see him in a dominant position heading into the race. However, lap 2 would almost lead to one of the biggest disasters ever. By lap 2, Lauda was pushing his Ferrari to the limit when he passed the infamous Bergwerk corner. His Ferrari swerved off the track, completely disintegrating in the process. The Ferrari smashed into the barriers, bursting into flames, but even more scary was the fact that Lauda was trapped in the car. He would finally be dislodged, already in a comatose state, but by the end of it, Lauda suffered damage to his face and lungs, but would only miss 2 races before getting back. Despite James Hunt winning the title, Lauda put up a valiant effort. Number 4. No barriers at Eau Rouge. Formula One fans might not know who Antoine Hubert is. However, he was an upcoming F2 driver who would have probably been in Formula One by the time you're watching this video. Unfortunately, things would come to a dramatic end at the Belgium Grand Prix, but this time it was during the F2 Championship. But before Hubert even made a name for himself, F1 driver Jackie Stewart was already a legend in the sport. During the 1966 Belgian Grand Prix, the British driver lost control of his car heading up Eau Rouge. Instead, Stewart smashed into a telephone pole, flipping his car. The car continued tumbling, finally resting on an old farmer's shed where it would come to a stop. Had it not been for fellow drivers Graham Hill and Bob Bondurant, who knows what would have happened. Both drivers stopped their cars and went to help Stewart get out of the car. With no medical staff available, it came down to the drivers to take care of themselves. Stewart had the following to say after the ordeal: "If I have any legacy to leave the sport, I hope it will be seen to be an area of safety, because when I arrived in Grand Prix racing, so-called precautions and safety measures were diabolical." Number 5. The famous European Grand Prix flip. When you think of Formula 1 cars flying through the air, the one most commonly thought about is this one. During the 2010 Formula 1 season, the halo was not yet a standard feature on F1 cars. This would almost cause disaster during the European Grand Prix. Driving for the much faster Red Bull team, the Australian found himself tucked in behind the Lotus of Heikki Kovalainen. Kovalainen was in a much slower car and should have ceded the position to the much faster Red Bull. However, the Lotus driver continued staying in front of Webber. Losing patience, Webber had a lapse in judgment, making a similar error to that of Alonso we discussed earlier in the video. He misjudged the speed of the Lotus, clipping his rear wheel. The contact sent Webber flying in the air before the car somersaulted and landed upside down. At close to 190 miles per hour, the Red Bull continued upside veering on the tarmac, coming to a stop in the barriers. The world stopped for a few seconds before everyone let out a sigh of relief. Webber emerged from the car unscathed, throwing his steering wheel in the gravel. This would later play a pivotal role in Formula 1, finally adopting the brand new Halo system. Number 6. Grosjean hits the barriers at 67G. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the F1 calendar changed completely. Instead of opening the season, the Bahrain Grand Prix would be pushed to later in the season. By the time of the race, Lewis Hamilton already wrapped up the championship, and Romain Grosjean was in his final season for the Haas Formula 1 team. But this would be one of the worst retirement gifts that anyone would get. As the race got underway, those in the front got off to a near perfect start. However, turn 3 would prove near fatal for the Frenchman. Grosjean lost control of his car as it was moving at more than 120 miles per hour. He smashed into the barrier, completely breaking the car in half. A fireball ensued as the fuel tank caught fire. Fortunately, Grosjean managed to dislodge himself from the seat, even though it took about 28 seconds, in which the car was already on fire. The F1 medical team reacted rapidly to get to the scene, where they immediately put out most of the fire and assisted Grosjean. By the end of the ordeal, the Frenchman had sustained only a few minor injuries and burns. Grosjean would go on to compete in the US IndyCar season the following year. But this once again proves just how durable these F1 cars are. Had it not been for his fire suit, who knows the level of damage he would have sustained. Number 7. The crash that changed Formula 1 forever. The year was 1994, and one of the greatest drivers in Formula 1 history had just made the move to Williams. Ayrton Senna will forever be synonymous with the McLaren F1 team, but as performance waned, Senna was seeking greener pastures. He would finally find a new home at Williams. Unfortunately, there was a lot of controversy at the start of the season, leading to Senna pushing the car to its limits. The Williams didn't get off to a good start in the first 2 races, but Imola should have changed all this. But this weekend will forever be remembered as one of the darkest in the history of the sport. The Friday practice saw an incident in which Rubens Barrichello crashed and almost suffocated due to severe swelling of the tongue. In fact, Senna was one of the drivers who would assist in saving Barrichello. But tragedy struck on the Saturday when Roland Ratzenberger smashed into the barrier and tragically lost his life. At this point, the FIA should have intervened and perhaps even cancelled the race weekend. However, it was determined that the race would continue. Just a few laps into the Imola Grand Prix, the unthinkable happened. Senna lost control of his car, smashing into the barriers. By the time medical staff and other drivers arrived, Senna was in critical condition and eventually extracted to the nearest hospital. Despite everything medical officials could do, they simply could not stop the inevitable. Ayrton Senna ultimately lost his life on this tragic day. But the FIA would persist with the race. Michael Schumacher would ultimately win, but said that the victory felt hollow. The incident would force the FIA to take drastic measures to make sure something like this would never happen again. Ultimately, one of the greatest drivers to ever be in the sport would lose his life due to various technical errors. Some of these are still discussed to this day. Accusations of sabotage or just a simple brake failure are often blamed for this tragic incident, an unnecessary loss of life. The world of Formula One is dangerous. Despite how simple it might seem on television, it's never as easy as these drivers make it look. These are 7 of the worst crashes in F1 history, but there are many more. So make sure to let us know in the comments if you'd like us to cover more of these incidents. Thanks for watching.